That looks like we can see it. Hello, everyone. Jeffrey Alexander McGuire. I'm called Jam, but I guess we get that in the next. Slide. Matthias, why don't you kick us off?
Yes, we're going to talk digital sovereignty. The really simple topic. So this is the IKEA version of digital sovereignty, because all digital sovereignty is some assembly required. Next slide, please.
So it's really, I find it really interesting because Matthias and I now, not for the first time, have discovered a topic that we both really care about, and we discuss it in some depth, and then we go off and do presentations, each of us in different events, and then come back together and atom smash whatever we've done. So I've been presenting this from a much more dire perspective, using important words like power and pragmatism. So Matthias is usually the nice version, and I'm usually the more drastic version of things. But it's incredibly crucial. Matthias and I, for example, work from a European perspective, and we're in Europe, and it is now clear that everyone's sort of worst expectations about hyperscalers and national governments interfering in technologies can be true and has been true sometimes. And so we really, really want to loop back and talk about the importance of digital sovereignty and a completely pragmatic way to get there. So I co-founded a strategic marketing partner for B2B technology organizations 9 years ago called Open Strategy Partners. And we do human marketing that connects. I have some clients and former clients in the room today. So hello, everyone. We're based in Cologne, Germany. We work around the world.
Yeah, and I'm Mathias Lesniak. I am from Norway. I have a wife and 2 kids. I have been working with Typo 3 CMS since 2003, and I'm the Typo 3 project ambassador. And if you hear my voice, it's a little bit bad today. That's because I helped Drupal celebrate 25 years last night. I'm in Chicago right now, but normally in Norway. Yeah, but Typo 3 CMS, you can change slides, Jam, and you can read more about it later. Another click is probably necessary, but let's just dive straight into what we're really here for, because when we work with all of these solutions that we buy and procure and want for our businesses, we have fallen into what we call the convenience trap. We have focused on buying what we want, but we haven't thought about why. And what happened in 2025, Jan?
Well, among other things, lots of large services drastically changed their pricing models. Some other services changed their moderation models. Some other services, pre-voluntarily or on orders, made judgment calls about who and who could not be a client without necessarily talking to those customers themselves. So, I mean, for better or worse, for the last 10, 20 years, it's been way easier to put a credit card down and get to work using something. And that something has often come from non-European countries, organizations whose approaches to privacy and security and data and human rights vary wildly from those that we have in Europe. So it's been pretty clear that it's that it is, and gratifyingly, people like Mathias and I from Open Source Movement, who've been saying this for a while, also like some other people who are here, we've been sort of saying other versions of this for a while, and sadly we've been proven right, and now I think we should really help other people. Mathias, why don't you talk about Denmark for a second?
Yeah, because this is the slide that we used to show at the beginning of 2025. Now in 2026, next slide, we show this slide. I mean, all of the stuff we said could happen, did happen. I mean, the Microsoft shut down the email of a judge in the International Criminal Court because, well, Trump didn't like him. And Microsoft has tried to backpedal a lot on that, but I mean, it shows that this is actually happening. And in addition, we're seeing, next slide, this all being used also on a diplomatic level. You know, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to make it hard for you. So today we're in a situation where our dependencies are really, really dangerous. And just look at the Netherlands up there on the map. I know they love orange, but this orange is a bad orange. It's the Microsoft orange. That's municipalities in the Netherlands and how dependent they are on Microsoft for their email services. It's also pretty bad in Northern Europe, next slide, where we don't have data about all of the municipalities. There's a lot more of them than what you can see here, but we're relying on technology that we don't own, technology we don't control, and that's terrible. And very often we just talk about where we store the data, but digital sovereignty is more than that thing. New slide. Digital sovereignty, we talk about the data sovereignty part, which is controlling the data and where you store it, who can access it, and those kind of things. But even more important than the data sovereignty and less talked about is digital governance. That is how you regulate the actions and how you define the control around operations and policies and infrastructure for your digital sovereignty. And it's so important that we would basically say, next slide, that there is no digital sovereignty without data sovereignty and digital governance. Next slide. And that's putting us in a situation where we're thinking data, but we need to look at maybe the governance part instead.
Right, and the governance part doesn't exist in a vacuum. As I said just a minute ago, governance is also, it has to talk about the regulatory and legal environment in which we live and operate. And in the European Union, for example, we have a legally defined right to privacy. We have, there's a whole set of human rights that we have by law in Europe that, for example, the United States doesn't have the legal right to some of those, right? So it's sometimes I've envisioned this as a pyramid where, or some sort of Venn diagram of where you live, what the legal situation is, then determines how much control you can have, right? So but there's a lot that we can do to help ourselves. And the really interesting part is that part of this starts by using local businesses, helping local people, and helping your own country first. And Mathias and I have occasionally been lately accused of being isolationist on this front, and Mathias will tell you why that's not true.
Yes, and really, I mean, it sounds like we're sort of far-right people who just want to keep everything within our country, our data for our people, and build everything at home and stuff like that. And that's not true. I mean, there are people in the US who think like that, but we are not against the US. That's not what we're talking about here. There isn't a US and them. The thing is that we can't build tech in Europe, for example, based on the methodology that has been used in the US that has put Europe in the situation that we're in right now. We have to look at a different model for doing it. Next slide. So we say that open source is not isolationism and nationalism, even though it can give you all of the benefits of digital sovereignty. The thing with open source, next slide, is that it gives you digital sovereignty while it also enables cooperation. So independence you can control and see and use everything, but you can also cooperate with others. And that is a superpower. Next slide.
Right. So when we build user communities, when we help our neighbors, when we choose open source technologies for our businesses and what we do, and I'm just going to reiterate very, very quickly, the 4 freedoms that define open source are the freedoms to use your software for anything you want to, for as long as you want to. The second freedom is you're allowed to see all of the code, study it, and understand it. You're allowed to, thirdly, make changes and improvements to it as you want. And 4, you are allowed to pass those changes and improvements on to other people. So in my case, German user groups, German companies, German hosting, and so on. When I'm using open source software, I can directly benefit the people in my neighborhood and in my economy. But when I start giving back, there is the superpower that Mathias was talking about, how if I'm helping my German neighbors do better and be more digitally sovereign with open source applications like Drupal and Typo3 and WordPress and so on, I am simultaneously helping a global community of people get better software and be more digitally sovereign. And one of our absolutely most favoritist examples in all of history.
I love this. I love this.
This was the UK technology purchasing, IT purchasing map in 2010, and there are the 5 or 9 dots on there, and they correspond very, very exactly to some addresses in London, Reading, Brighton, and whatever is in between there. And if you looked up a map of the headquarters at that time of IBM, Hewlett Packard, Oracle, Apple, Microsoft, and so on, that's that map. And so the UK government was spending literally billions of pounds for its IT infrastructure, and it was sending that money, a huge percent of it, they were sending that money out of the country. So they were collecting residence taxes and they were providing services to the residents and the money was draining out of the economy and going to hyperscalers and so on, largely outside of the UK. There was a huge push for digitalization and restructuring around this time, and the UK Cabinet Office organized it and did an absolutely brilliant job in many ways. And they turned hundreds of government websites into gov.uk, which is still a shining example of good UX and good government services. They also changed the procurement mandate. So they said software projects under £1 million in projected budget should be open to smaller companies. So all of a sudden, local agencies, local firms had a chance to bid on projects that they've never had before. They built the G Cloud to accommodate this bidding process. They also said smaller companies can bid on government projects, and in the case of equal functionality, there should be a preference for open source software. And 4 years later, this was the IT supplier map, and you can imagine how many people got new jobs, how much they were able to train, how much money was spent, and spending money down in Somerset, where my mum lives. All of a sudden, that money went to potentially a supplier in Somerset, but at least somewhere in the UK, and a way more money stayed. And it's an incredibly important, empowering bit of economic thinking to become digitally sovereign.
So what you saw in the map there is resilience in practice. You share the knowledge, you create more feet to stand on. If half of those businesses disappeared, it wouldn't affect the country the same way as it would if half of the businesses on the map would disappear. It's really building resilience as a part of this governance that we need to build around the solutions that we have. And I talked about the US. The US is us. We are all in a situation where we need to think about digital sovereignty wherever we are. We need to build resilient software communities. So whether you're in the US or you're in Europe or you're in China or Australia, what we need to think about is there is no made in US, made in the EU. It's all about trying to build networks of international collaboration that can give us more legs to stand on in the whole digital sovereignty situation. Yeah.
A lot of people in our industry have a dangerous tendency towards perfectionism, and I think it's really important at this point to understand that we live within all of these geographical, regulatory, and so on areas and environments, and if we probably none of us can be perfectly digitally sovereign, and there's a question of what entities are even really truly capable of that. Maybe governments, maybe very large corporations, but rather than waiting until a perfect solution comes along and suffering the potential consequences of that, and rather than doing nothing, right, which is probably also not good, we can make a pragmatic choice, and every choice towards sovereignty, towards data sovereignty, towards privacy, towards more empowerment, it gets better, right? It should be a step in the right direction. However, Mathias thinks,
can you really be pragmatic about bad replacements? Can you take a piece of software and say, well, I'll throw out Microsoft and I'll take this open source software that doesn't look as shiny, that maybe doesn't have all of the features that Microsoft has built into their solution. Then I asked the question, firstly, are you using all of those features already? Look at the features you're using and think about, next slide, this convenience trap that you did fall into previously. You have to become an active part of the building of the software. When you choose a piece of software, well, next slide, you have to put your money where your digitally sovereign mouth is. You have to put money into the features that you want to build instead of just paying for a license. You have to be an active participant in the open source communities. And open source is not only a developer community. We see that a lot. People think that, oh, it's only for developers, but it is actually also for users. Next slide. So yes, as a user, you can be just as much a part of those communities as you can be as a developer or anything else. This is humans working together. That's the requirement. Yes, user, that's user. Next slide.
So as Mathias was hinting at, this choice of more open source solutions and the choice to improve them and to get involved with them, because of the four freedoms, open source comes with some really some nice things, like the best, you need to understand where your data goes, for example, to be digitally sovereign. Well, open source is transparent by default, right? Transparency builds autonomy, so we're more independent. If we take care of the people that we work with, care about, live with, we can all become more resilient, economically resilient, technologically resilient, and then by choosing open source and piece by piece and over time, we can become more and more resilient, more and more autonomous, and more and more digitally sovereign. In this picture, we evolve from buying stuff from other people to being partners in a digitally sovereign ecosystem. And so in a really simple, easy case is if you're using an open source solution, an alternative to pick your service of your choice, and you want it to do something else, you can either build that thing if you have the skills for it and send it back to the community, or you can request that you'd like to have that, or if you find something wrong and you file a bug report, you're already contributing to making that thing better. Very often, if you want a new feature or if you've found a problem, other people are going to find it as well. And as long as the maintainers maintainers can't fix it until they hear about it. So you're contributing to your own stack and at the same time helping other people. And this goes across, as we saw with the UK suppliers map. This has very, very large ramifications across industries and across economies. So when you are thinking about taking on a service, buying a piece of software, please consider asking the service providers, the vendors that you're speaking with, ask them what sovereignty services can they offer you. Do they share your concerns about sovereignty? If they look at you like you're crazy, maybe you need to talk with somebody else. Are they thinking long term? Will their work contribute to your sovereignty? Can they start you off with a sovereignty audit and maybe build a roadmap with you about how to get your business towards digital sovereignty, right? And on a technical level, are dependencies and integrations, data flow, storage, etc., is that transparent and documented? If so, that would give me a lot of confidence in going with that person.
But that's so boring with all of those question marks and stuff like that. I mean, what we're doing here is, we're being business coaches. So let's make this into a real business coach slide, right? What we need to do is put it into an acronym, do acrostics. Next slide. As a buyer, think Parsec, your 6-step sovereignty plan. You have to find a partner. You have to do an audit of your digital sovereignty. You have to write tenders, RFPs that are sovereignty focused, where you require digital sovereignty as a part of your procurement. You have to support these open processes. You're not only a passive buyer. You're one who can choose where you want to put your money, which features you want to support. And that's a new way of working. So you have to educate your organization so that you have an organization-wide buy-in for why you're doing this different thing and not just buying stuff off the shelf necessarily. And then through all of that, you enter into a change process where you transition to sovereign alternatives. Next slide. So we know what we need to do. Every decision counts, no matter how small. You can help everyone else in the ecosystem by helping yourself. Choose to partner with people who care as much as you do about this. Always. Now, please. Thank you so much for listening to us. I'm Jam from Open Strategy Partners. And I'm Mathias Lesniak from the Type 3 Association. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So good to know, after 10 years of knowing Jam, his middle name is Alexander. Thank you very much for your presentation. Any questions for those two? We have a few more minutes left. No questions at all?
I can say that, this is the short version. We can do it in 40, 50, 60 minutes as well with a lot more detail.
We have three times more slides.
Yeah, and we have it. This was the buyer version. We have it for developers. We have it for agencies. We do it for different target groups because we all need a different way of working in order to really be digitally sovereign or deliver digital sovereignty.
And fun fact, Mathias comes up with new acronyms for every version we do. So we had Camel and Amoeba and Kareem and Parsec. Yes, with appropriate graphics in every case.
Thank you very much. I saw the longer version of this at Type 3 Con. I was really happy to see that you can do it also in 25 minutes. Thank you very much. It's a super important topic. Thank you everyone for attending, and greetings from Janos. He's flying back home on a rescheduled plane, so I was your host today.
Great.
Have a great afternoon or morning.
Thanks so much.
Depending
we do
on
weddings,
where you are.
bar mitzvahs, kids' birthday parties.
Thank you, Jam. Thank you, Mathias.
Greetings to your sovereign.